Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
Do not accept a friend request from Hormel Foods. It could be spam. Spam.
We didn't make it to the Spam Museum this year, did we?
No, it was one of those we were planning to, but what we had found out is that the stores that were south, I think one in Owatonna, first of all, the one in Austin allegedly closed, and then the one in Owatonna wasn't open Sunday, which was the only day we could go, or I could go because of my work schedule. So we elected just to go to Mankato and hit around there and head north again. So that's just the way it goes sometimes. But we got Black Friday coming up.
And, we do.
Barring any, well, we'll talk about it when we get to Freaking and Geeking, but barring any unusual viral events, we're all planned and ready to rock. We're just we're talking off air where we're going to hit this year, but it doesn't matter. We got more time than money. We hit everywhere.
I don't have time or money.
Yeah, but you had pie.
Well, I still have pie.
And you missed out.
Thanksgiving is in a couple of days. Of course I have pie.
And you missed out on something very important. But we'll talk about that when we get to Freaking.
Oh, well, I miss out on everything important.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah. So I have me in my hand here, the Overstreet Price Guide.
The big one?
Yeah, for the 50th anniversary edition.
Yeah, I've had mine. I talked about it before. I got the Heroes Initiative Limited Edition. That was actually signed by cover artist Kevin Nolan on behalf of the Heroes Initiative. So I got a COA with mine. A little bit more expensive. I like it. And I got the hardcover. How about you, Cory?
You always get the hardcover.
Yeah. Which version did you go for?
I went with the Todd McFarlane Spawn Spider-Man.
I'd have done that too if I hadn't. I mean, I just make a habit of picking up the Heroes Initiative version.
And I also did pick up the reprint of the first Overstreet Price Guide. And when you look through it, the prices aren't what gets me. It's what's listed and what's not.
Yes.
It's
and
like
I've had
March on Comics, not in there at all.
I had the
Classics Illustrated, not in there at all.
Was it Fan Magazine did a reprint of that? And,
yeah, they did a limited reprint.
And I sold it a while ago.
Yes.
I did actually see an original #1 at Dreamhaven. So that was kind of cool just to see that. Now, I'm kind of disappointed because I had thought I ordered the big 50th anniversary celebration and the autographed deluxe that Bob Overstreet signed, and there was going to come with all this fun stuff and blah, blah, blah. I don't see a hide nor hair of it. I don't see any cancellation of it. I don't see any, it's not on my, to be shipped list. So I don't know, did they just cancel it and I got credit somewhere along the line? Did it just disappear? I just don't know.
Joe,
but
do you know how much a first printing of the 1970 Price Guide is?
I think Dreamhaven had it about $500.
In mint goes for $19.50. No, so not $19.50. $1,950. They did a second printing of $1,600. And one thing I did not know, that for the first few years, they were not the only comic book price guide out there. There were other comic book price guides. It kind of fell away by the time you got to 1978, 79, because they had signed up with a major publisher and the others hadn't. And then Krause Publications had a price guide for a while too. That was also a checklist. And I believe you preferred that one.
I like the checklist because they were very methodical about printing everything and all the variants. Whereas Overstreet was kind of like, yeah, Kazar went through 100, no big deal. And you're like, well, yeah, but to me it is. Now, they did have the big book eventually, which probably was a result of competing with the Comic Buyer's Guide, where it was huge, like a textbook type thing, spiral bound, so you could flip through it, and that had individual checks for the Golden Age forward, which was really cool, which I thought was kind of fun.
according to this, they started that in 2001, and they call it the big comic book price guide.
So I'm just
Not
looking
just
at
big.
days. Apparently,
Big.
there was a reproduction that they sold for like $17 that you can find for like $30. I don't know what date.
Yeah, that
Just says it was a reproduction, because I know there was one that was included. I want to say it was included with Fan Magazine.
Yes.
And because I remember having it, and then I like I said, I had it, so I sold it. The buyer's guide, unfortunately, they're long gone to the dusty bins of history, which is really too bad, because I really do enjoy the price list. I forget what the last one I got. The last one they published was like 2010. So somewhere I actually have the price list of 2010, and I've got everything in there, like Supergirl, the Malibu collection I've been trying to finish up, and things like that. I will eventually activate an online one that was recommended by our departed friend Mike, and I'm trying to get it to pop up here. Let's see if I can find it.
Well, I am so old. I remember when I bought these sheets, and they were specially printed sheets where you could check off your comics. And I ordered 100 of them. And this was back when only businesses and copy shops could make copies. Now you can buy a printer and make copies, all you want. And I made tons and tons of copies, and I spent an entire summer logging my comics. And then I would update it once a month, and then eventually I just went, oh my God, this is way too much work. I just don't care.
I had a notebook that I did it with, a spiral bound notebook, and as my collection got bigger, eventually I stopped writing what I had, and I would write what I'm missing.
Yes.
And also things like if I had a real beat up copy, things I'd replace it. The app I'm looking at is CLZ Comics. It's $15 a month. And I haven't activated it yet because I haven't had time to really sit down and like input everything. At one time, I did use the what was the app that Atomic Avenue uses?
Oh, I don't know.
Used to use used to pay like $150 for it, and you could they would update things. The deluxe $300 version would give you scans, and you could upload. And if you found a book they didn't have, you'd send them a picture of the cover and the, I say Indica. And, they might send you a thank you in an extra month. I don't know if that's still Comic Base. That's what it was called.
Oh yeah, I remember Comic Base.
And they had like a free version you could list 500 titles. And then, the more deluxe you went, the better it went. But like I said, I will eventually activate my guide, because even today I ran out to a comic store. I'll talk about it in geeking. I was helping my folks. I'll just mention it here and cross out. But my folks are trying to get Netflix going, and they have a smart TV and they can't figure out how. And their biggest problem is oh my God, my folks are password challenged. They're smart because they write down, okay, this has this password, this has that password. Then they lose the passwords. And I'm like, I can't help you if you lose the passwords, because with the smart TV, you hook it up to the internet, and then you just say, okay, activate Netflix. So they went out and they bought what's Amazon's version of Roku? Stick?
The Fire Stick.
Fire Stick. And I think my daughter helped them get set up with that. So, but I went out to double check, make sure everything was going, and it seems to be. And then there was a comic store on the way back. I just swung by, and usually when I do that, I'm just picking up things I hope I don't have, or if they're like doing crazy stuff, like I picked up some dollar hardcovers. I'll just mention a couple here, like a Severed from a horror book from Image Comics hardcover, and then a Spider-Man Red Sonja crossover, the new one that Michael Turner did, and maybe I don't know if this one reprints the original one that you and I remember from Marvel Tales, but $5, $1. I mean, come on, that's fun stuff. I'll just buy it, read it, or in the case of the Red Sonja, if I think I have it, I'll just put it in the the charity booth, which I haven't got a chance to talk to Kelly. Maybe we'll see him next week when we run about, but I know they have dates ready for the con.
Oh my goodness, you're getting a call.
So popular. Hang on a second here.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Okay, I had a DoorDash, so I just told him to hang out. I'll be up there in a couple hours and pick it up. Meantime, he's going to just put the sandwich under his arm and keep it warm for me. So
Oh, good.
I got that to look forward to when we're done.
Now, one of the things I always look at are the top 10s and top 20s and top 100s and stuff, like the top 50 Silver Age, top 50 Bronze Age, top 50 Copper Age, top 20 Modern Age. Joe, what is the number one Modern Age comic?
Well, what does he consider Modern Age? Where's the cutoff?
2000.
2000?
Yes.
No,
it's got to be earlier than that. I would say Copper Age is mostly the 80s, according to this. So I would say the 90s and up.
Okay, well, I would say maybe the first Deadpool.
Nope. Not even in the top 20.
Really? Oh, maybe it's cooled off. I couldn't even tell you.
Walking Dead number one at $1,225.
Wow.
They've also got, this is the part that I always like, where they break out different genres. So you've got the top 10 crime comics. The first three are the first, four? No, there were just 4 random issues of Crime Does Not Pay. Then True Crime Comics, number 2 and 3 are in there. Top 10 horror comics, number 1, Journey into Mystery, number 1. Which really surprises me. I thought it would be an EC book because there's a lot more demand for EC, but I guess there are fewer copies of Journey into Mystery.
I'm just bidding on a New Mutants 98. Someone started an auction for $1. Yeah, I doubt I'll get it for that, but what the hell? I'll toss my hand in the ring.
New Mutants 98 is only $315, by the way.
Yeah, and what I would do is the one thing about Overstreet, which was always annoying to me, even as a comic retailer. Not only less as a dealer, but definitely as a comic retailer, he was woefully outdated. That was one of the conceits in Minnesota, and I've talked about it before, because people would come up and they'd be like, "Oh, you got that price at $200. Overstreet's only got it at $150." And you're like, "Well, but what you're forgetting is the guide is already obsolete by the time it's printed because he's telling you what it's sold for, not what it's selling at." Back then, that's why we had tons of people coming up from Chicago because they'd buy stuff at what we had it priced at, because a lot of people just price it at guide, and they go back to Chicago, and that's where you started hearing people selling it, 2, 3, 4 times guide, and I love the retailers in the beginning of the Overstreet because they're always talking about what's sold, and we sold this at multiple guides. That phenomena is kind of with us still because eBay has kind of taken that aside. So just because they're saying, "Oh, New Mutants 98 is $350," well, yeah, that's what it may have sold for. But here's a 9.6 at $430. Here's somebody bidding it. That's almost that. So be careful. The other thing that Overstreet doesn't do, he refuses to acknowledge hot comics. He likes to be, again, in the 70s, 80s, he was kind of the vanguard because he never recognized the black and white. So you'd be the guy, the kid selling your New Mutants number 1 for $3 because he refused to realize it was a $200 comic. And then, of course, years later, it was like, "Oh, yeah, it's worth maybe $100. Oh, sorry, it's already in the $3,000 range." So he's always got a leg. He's wonderful, wonderful resource for discovering, gold, silver, bronze. Absolutely terrible for New Age.
You could also tell, back in the day, what he was
hot on.
Yeah, because the prices
was always,
would go low.
Here's what he bought.
Prices would go low until he completed his collection, then they would explode.
And there was
one year, it's like, "Oh, look, all the EC books went up by 50 to 70%. He must have finished his collection."
There was also and I don't remember the time. I want to say the mid 80s, where prices were going up fast and fast. And it's like if a near mint was $100, a fine would be $75. And then all of a sudden there was this huge price adjustment because somebody realized there are way more copies of issues, including key issues, in fine, very good, good shape. And all those prices dropped. And people just went, oh, the people howled. It was just because it was like, oh my God, my collections were nothing. Right or wrong, I think it was right in this case. But it's always buyer beware. And what I recommend is if you think you got a hot book, look on the eBays first.
Yeah.
Especially, well, I'll give you a great example. The last issues of Power Girl, the run that predates
the new 52.
Yeah, and while you talk, I'm going to go look up Power Girl here. And let's see.
Another thing that I always point out is these are for unslabbed books. So if it's, oh, this is a 9.8, it's going to go for multiple guide, because a slabbed book, especially of a key or a more expensive book, the people who slab them track them. They track those sales. And one of the main reasons slabbing is around is this is a high dollar book. We are assigning a grade to it rather than the guy on eBay says, well, this is a near mint, and the seller goes, oh wait, no, this is a very fine. If it's slabbed and has been graded, then everybody agrees, okay, that's what it is. Even if you look at it and you go, that doesn't look like a 9.7 to me, that's what it is. So all sales will be based on that. There are a lot of people who hate slabbing. Some of the older collectors I know will actually, stuff for their collection, they will actually buy slab books and crack them open.
I don't do that, but I'm not big on slab books. I mean, I want to read it. The only ones I've slabbed are my personal copies. Okay, here's an example. I got Power Girl here, and if you're on page 872 of the guide, you can read along. So the later issues that Adam Hughes, did actually go up in price quite a bit. And then he has number 27, which he calls an ample cleavage cover, at $75. Folks, I've sold several copies at $150. This is a perfect example why, and he doesn't count eBay because I'm sure he has no way of really tracking eBay. He could track eBay all you want. eBay's kind of changed a bit. When it first started, it would give a lot of hot books, crazy prices. Now it's more of a buy it now type thing. But I also, from there, go all the way to the top to reiterate what Cory was saying. The highest grade he goes is 9.2, which is a near mint minus. When I sell my books on eBay, I always say they're near mint. I never call them mint. I've had an experience where I've sent in, back when I had the shop, I would send in the most cherry copy I could find thinking, okay, I'll get a 9.8, and it comes back like an 8. And I'm like, how do they grade this? They don't have to justify what they graded it at. It doesn't matter if it's CGC or whoever, there's another one that does it. And they even say, hey, if you crack it open, send it in, we'll regrade it, but you don't get a guarantee that it'll get the same price.
Right. So
I'm telling you, a book right out of my box, never made it to the shelf, just got sent in and slabbed. I couldn't even score a 9.8 on. So, again,
most 9.8s are direct from the printer, because those are all very special. Usually it's, there's an arrangement that they don't get shipped to Diamond. They just, from the printer to CGC. Because if you notice, most of your 9.8s are sold by retail.
It's got to be more insidious too, because there's no way you're going to get a whole box of 9.8s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, oftentimes I wonder, and I haven't talked to anybody who slabs enough. I said, you send a bunch of books in and tell them, hey, if I don't get a 9.8, don't slab it. Because again, you still got to pay them because they're spending their time grading this sucker. And it's not like a single person's doing it according to them. They always have they're experts. Ooh, kind of like the shadow cabinet that gave Nick Fury his job, you know. We're grading your comics. So yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, and I think I've talked about it before, you know, my dentist who retired, him and his son were investing in 9.8 comics. And oftentimes before I'd get my work done, I'd talk with the dentist and he'd say, what should I be looking for? And I'm saying, well, you know, Edge of Spider-Verse 2, first Spider-Gwen, very popular. And I sold mine unslabbed for $300. You know, we talked about the first Gamora, and he just wanted to talk to his son. His son used to shop at Hot Comics when I owned it. And he just wanted to talk to his son, like, well, you know, maybe we should look at Strange Tales 180. That's supposed to be first Gamora. So it'd make, you know, he had no idea what the hell he was talking about. But the son would be like, oh, yeah. You know, and I told him, like, you know, 300, Amazing Spider-Man, New Mutants 98, you know, a lot of the stuff they knew about. But anytime, and not everything that's 9.8 goes up. I've got, when I used to buy through Dynamic Forces, because they always do like a Black Friday boxes and stuff. They sent me like a 9.8, one of those lenticular covers that came out a number of years ago, and they were all 9.8 anyways, but they're all 9.8. So at very least, I could maybe sell it for $10. You know, and I don't care because it was part of a bigger package. But, you know, when you're paying $30 to get something slabbed and it comes back and the value of it's only $15, even though you slabbed it. So, yeah, I mean, if you got something worth doing, for me, I did what comic creator Bo Smith did. I just slabbed comics that mean something to me. Not the ones that are autographed, because a lot of times they autographed it in the inside page. So, yeah, it'd be slabbed and autographed, but now I'll never see the autograph again. So that's my thing on it.
But there is a list. We were talking a little about you know, top 10 romance, top 10 sci-fi, top 10 western. With me getting that Marvel Horror and Marvel Horror Lives Again, and I think you have the two Marvel Horror essentials, right?
Yeah, they're buried in my essential box.
I thought it's time for a Fave Five.
Fave Five. Do we have a special Fave Five party time? No,
now we do.
You should talk to my cousin. He could make some jingles for us for these segments.
But Marvel is on my mind because I'm reading that Marvel Horror Lives Again.
And I thought, on your mind. Holy cow! I've been outbid on New Mutants. That shall not stand. I only bid like $6.66. So you know.
Oh, okay. So I thought we.
Cory, give me a number between 67, 66, and 100.
92.5.
92.5. Confirmed? I've been outbid. I'm
Already?
Shocked, I tell you. This will be continued in the next podcast.
I thought we would talk about our Fave 5 Marvel non-superhero books.
Ooh.
Because Marvel put out tons and tons of non-superhero books using that same formula. Starting with Sergeant Fury. Sergeant Fury, what it was, the war books over at DC were selling, and Martin Goodman came to him and said, well, I want you guys to do a war book, but do it like that Fantastic Four book.
Yeah.
So that's how Sergeant Fury came about. They canceled the Hulk because it wasn't selling and replaced it with Sergeant Fury, which Stan had Sergeant Fury, who was the leader, and then a bunch of colorful characters who were wisecracking, lots of wisecracking, lots of Kirby action. Kirby, would take some of his experiences from the war and kind of turn them into superhero type stories. And if you read the early Sergeant Furies, man, they read like superhero books, but they're not. They're war comics. In the 70s, Marvel had a horror line, but superheroes were their bread and butter, so a lot of their horror books had covers like they were superhero books, or even in the 80s, you and I talked about G.I. Joe and Transformers. They weren't superheroes, but they were written as if they were superhero books. So I thought, now the parameter is it can't be, costume characters who fight supervillains. It could be horror, it could be war, it could be science fiction, it could be anything except superhero books. They can even interact with the superhero universe, because at Marvel everything tied into the universe, unless it was Jack Kirby when he came back a second time and said, I don't want to do that.
Now, see, I went one further because to me, if it tied into the Marvel universe, I discounted it. And that left out runs that I love, like Godzilla. I don't have it, but I do have the essential. Micronauts, which I got the complete run. I mean, the early stuff that Michael Golden did. Oh, awesome. Transformers, I don't count, even though there was a Spider-Man crossover, mainly because I ended up selling my whole set. And if it's one of those I really like, I wouldn't have sold it. But my first one is Weird World. Weird World is it has a couple of history. It's basically created by Doug Mensch and Mike Ploog. Say it with me, Cory. Ploog.
Who did some of the best Man-Thing stuff in the 70s, too. And he escaped and did movies. That's where he went.
Ploog. So he didn't drop in the pool. Ploog. The first appearance was Marvel Premiere number 38. It was not the first appearance for me, because where I picked up was in Marvel Super Special number 11 through 13, where they did a beautiful, John Buscema, he penciled it, and it was airbrushed by colorist Peter Ledger. It was a 3-part Shadow of the Realm story, just amazing. Doug Mensch did the script.
On the cover, didn't they say Marvel color?
I'm not sure, because mine are buried in my collection. But
because they pushed it as this is a whole new process for reprinting, for printing art.
And Marvel Super Specials were amazing anyways. I mean, I was on board. I picked up almost all of them. I almost did Marvel Super Special as a run, but I know we've talked about it in the past. And again, like Kiss, the 2 Kiss specials were good, and it kind of tied into the Marvel universe, but not really. And then, the long missing Sgt. Pepper one. But the other thing that it did, it went from, I guess it was in the black and white magazine, Marvel Super Action. I'm trying to find which one. Oh, number 1, 1976. So that was it, the first appearance. And then it went into Marvel Premiere number 38, which took me, I mean, nowadays, you kids, just go to the eBays, just put out a web thing on your Facebooks. Yeah, man, if we couldn't find it at our friendly neighborhood comic store, it was like a grail, just trying to find it. I picked up the Marvel Super Specials, and I believe the last appearance of this particular Weird World was in Marvel Fanfare number 28. Ploog did the first part of a Weird World trilogy, and then Pat Broderick did the subsequent issues. This has all been reprinted in a book, Weird World Warriors of the Shadow Realm, came out in 05. You can find it for like $12-15 on eBay. And what was great about it, it was its own world. It had an internal consistency. The protagonists were elves, Tyndall and Nanala. And of course, there was a crabby dwarf named Mudbutt, because he tended to land on his backside every time he had a quarrel.
Which, as a kid, made me laugh myself sick, because that's what that's what we called it when you had when you had loose stools.
Woohoo! When you sneak a kid an X-Lax and tell him it's a chocolate bar. Ha ha, funny. They were both borrowed from a floating ring-shaped island of Klarn, and oftentimes they talked about like underneath the shadow is like a bad realm, and the world was consistent. It was fun. They never went back and revisited these after Marvel Fanfare. They took Weird World and made it part of the Secret Wars storyline, where they kind of shoved all sorts of weird things in there, like Morgan Le Fay, Skull the Slayer, Jennifer Kale, different Man-Things, characters from Saga of Crystar, which was a toy crossover. And even now in Doctor Strange, I think in Strange Academy, some of the students went flying through Weird World. So don't get that confused. But the original one was just a lot of fun, more of a fantasy thing. Marvel Premier in and of itself was a lot of fun. There were a lot of good properties that they had there. I'm thinking Seeker 3000 was a great property. They should have done more. And of course, issue 50, Alice Cooper. I mean, come on. So that was my number one pick. Like I said, I'm a little more strict. My picks that Marvel did not necessarily cross over into the Marvel world.
Weird World was also, they really pushed it as Tolkien-esque. Because in the 70s,
Tolkien was hot.
It wasn't, this is a fantasy book. This is a Tolkien-like book. To the point where I was at Uncle Hugo's one time, looking through the used books, and I found this whole area that had these different fantasy trilogies from the 70s that, authors you hadn't heard of, series you hadn't heard of, but you'd pick it up and it looked like the painted covers to the Lord of the Rings books. And you would turn over the back and it would be elves and orcs in conflict in this Tolkien-esque story where they must find this magic sword or they must destroy this magic wand. Or there was a whole industry in the 70s of people knocking off Tolkien. And this was Marvel's attempt to jump on that. I loved it. And when they did, we're bringing back Weird World, it was like, oh, wow, that'll be great. What a cool idea, to do a fantasy series. And no, it's not. Okay, fine. For me, my number 5 was a series that, yes, it kind of tied into the Marvel Universe, but in the 70s when it was published, it couldn't. And that is Tales of the Zombie, the Simon Garth stories. Simon Garth was actually had a zombie story from the early 50s in one of the horror mags. And they did a magazine, Tales from the Zombie. Steve Gerber and a number of different artists told the story of Simon Garth, who was a former plantation owner who, when he died, there was a mystic amulet, and whoever held that amulet controlled him. Much like Gerber's Man-Thing, the zombie himself couldn't do much. And the stories were about other people using him for vengeance or for justice or things like that. And because it was in the black and white magazines, it could get a little more adult. There was more violence. The stories were more complex. And it had just beautiful art by people like Pablo Marcos and Tony DeZungia. But the thing that I liked best about it was it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the last story that ended the whole thing was in Tales of the Zombie 9. And there was one more issue of Tales of the Zombie. And I guess another writer, artist team was going to pick it up. But the art didn't get to Marvel in time, so instead they went with a black and white Brother Voodoo story. But they have since used the character a few times in the Marvel Universe now that they can use zombies. But it's just one of those great Marvel black and white series. And, Steve Gerber was, head and shoulders above most writers in the 70s anyway. But giving him free rein to do a horror series was one of the best things Marvel did. It's all available in the Tales of the Zombie Essential, and it's also available in the Marvel Horror Omnibus. And I imagine at some point they will just reprint it as its own trade paperback or something, because, if you're going to reprint it twice, might as well do it a third time. But that, one of my favorite, and it knew nothing about it in the 70s when I was a kid, because the black and white magazines, they had boobies in them, so Mom said I couldn't get those.
Boobies.
And they were also $1 when a regular comic was $1, so.
Did I ever tell you how I got busted for buying Howard the Duck magazine #1?
Yes,
Oh, boobies are bad.
the Play Duck. And you got
Terrible.
Dude
Terrible.
Beverly.
I know.
So, Joe, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is Millie the Model.
Ooh.
Yeah. This is going to be basically this is one of those things where my ma used to come home with grocery bags full of comics that she would get from garage sales. And I'm not talking the later Millie where she kind of turned into like an Archie type thing. I'm talking in the 60s when it was more realistic, and it was Millie the Model. She hung out in Sleepy Gap, Kansas. Well, that's where she was. And then she moved to New York. She was in love with photographer Clicker, originally Flicker. Her friends were Daisy, the wardrobe assistant, Tony Turner. Her kind of nemesis was Chili Storm. You know, they'd have exchanges like, sorry, I'm late. I got back from the salon. And Chili go, too bad they didn't have time to take you, you know. And, of course, Chili was a redhead. Even then, I kind of, knew. It was just one of those things. The reason why I was drawn to these, because first off, they were Marvel comics. I started out a Marvel zombie. I mean, it took me a long time before I got into DC's, and then I got into First and Pacific, and discovered there's more going on than just Marvel. But what really tripped me going, Cory, do you remember in Defenders, Patsy Walker? And again, I had some Patsy Walker comics too. And it was like, well, wait a minute, she's tied into Hellcat. And she was a Defender. And then she went and visited Millie the Model in an issue of Defenders. And I was like, it ties together. And I was aware of the Golden Age, Silver Age. I mean, how could you not be, like, when you read a reprint of Fantastic Four and see Submariner come back, or Captain America, I haven't seen you since World War II. And so I was aware of the Golden Age. So to me, it was like, I was like, oh, I'm tied into this little bit of continuity because Millie is still around. She's a little bit older. So that was kind of a unique thing for someone who was a Marvel zombie. So naturally, I had to read Millie the Model. Did not find a lot of them, but because they were more realistically drawn, and I'm trying to figure out who did the art, but they don't really list a lot of artists. And then, of course, later on, Dan DeCarlo into the well, I think they started in the 50s, didn't they? More Archie-esque. And then they went to realistic, and then they kind of returned.
Yep.
So I was, again, not even aware of that until, probably years later. They did a 207 issues, the first one starting in 45, the last December 73. I've had numerous ones that I've bought and read and put on eBay, and they go pretty pricey if you can keep them in good shape. And there was a lot of different artists. You'd see Basil Wolverine show up. Harvey Kurtzman did some stuff. Of course, Lee, Goldberg were there. Kirby was in a few. So you never quite knew what happened. Millie herself became part of the Marvel Universe in Fantastic Four Annual number 3, which was way before I did it. And again, I knew who was Fantastic.
Her and Patsy Walker showed up at Reed and Sue's wedding.
Yeah. Oh, man.
No, her and Millie the Model showed up at Patsy Walker.
No, Patsy was there. And Hetty Wolf. They were part of the sidewalk crowd. And I heard a couple of guys at the end tried to crash the wedding, but they got booted by Nick Fury, which was good. Good. Yeah. So for me, again, I don't know if these are considered canon. In my view, they are. And they weren't really tied to the Marvel Universe. But because of that Defender issue, and I don't know which one, my Defenders are long buried in my collection. I have the whole run. But that was just kind of a fun little visit. It never really, nothing became of it. It was just kind of her telling Patsy, you could come back and work for me and blah, blah, blah. She didn't. She went back to the Defenders. And, of course, Patsy's been around in all sorts of reincarnations and stuff like that, maybe even the last series. So, again, kind of bending my rule of what we talked about, but I'm pretty sure when Millie the Model was being published in 67, there was really no thought that it tied into the superhero universe.
Oh, no.
So
other than a gag here and there.
Yeah. And it was a lot of fun, so I enjoyed it.
Number 4 for me is a series that Marvel had, and then they lost, and then they got it back. Star Wars. Star Wars is probably one of the most successful licensed comics ever, unless maybe you're thinking the Disney stuff over at Dell and Gold Key. But for Marvel, Star Wars saved them in the 70s. They were losing money hand over fist in 75, 76 because of late books. And if you go back, we did a 3-part series on late books where we get into why late comics can kill a comic company, other than fans going, oh, the book's late, I'm not going to buy it. But Marvel was losing money hand over fist. They got the license to Star Wars. Roy Thomas actually worked to bring that in. And they were publishing the comic before the movie came out. I think, the first 2 or 3 issues were out before the movie. So there were some people, me included, who were like, oh, this is an adaptation of a new Marvel comic. When I saw the first trailers and stuff, because I'd seen Star Wars in Marvel, but it sold scary well. They reprinted it over and over and over. They reprinted it in tons of different formulas. They did, I think, 2 different Treasury editions. One was all 6 issues in one Treasury. The one I got was they printed 1 through 3 in one Treasury, 4, 5, and 6 in another Treasury. They did a small paperback book. They did all of that. And then they were the only ones telling Star Wars stories between the movies, except for the book Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which we've talked about in the past. And then after Return of the Jedi, they were the only ones doing Star Wars at all. And then when they got it back in 2015, the first issue was one of the first comics since the 90s to sell 1 million copies. It's also, except for a few times here and there, Marvel has put top talent on the book. I mean, there was this glorious time when it was written by Archie Goodwin and drawn by Al Williamson. You had Joe Duffy doing early stories in that, drawn by Will Portacio. The latest run, they're putting top names on it as well. Star Wars, even the issues that aren't great, Carmine Infantino, had great stories. And it's one of my favorite non-superhero books ever. Joe?
All right. I'm trying to get my... I'm so tempted to do Marvel Comics Super Special because there were so many great properties and movies. But
I know you love that Jaws 2 adaptation.
Well, yeah, look at the chest on that thing. Boobies sell. Little kids love that stuff. I mean, the Kiss were fun. The Beatles story was fun. I mean, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Never did get the Sgt. Pepper one.
How about Xanadu?
I did get Xanadu. I was a Marvel zombie. I bought pretty much everything. Even tied into like Star Wars. I remember buying Empire Strikes Back, and then John was told at the comic store that they released it too soon and that they were to recall all copies and sit on them, and he didn't. But, God, if we'd had eBay back then, I would have flipped that damn thing. But there's another run that I bought equally as well, and I have to Marvel graphic novels. And it started, of course, with the death of Captain Marvel. And, I mean, they did like 9 printings of that thing. And it was a big deal. But then the second one, they went into non-Marvel properties. Elric, the Dreaming City. I'm a big Elric fan. My cousin, who passed away earlier this year, gave me first of all, he gave me the Chronicles of Corum, and then I read the Elric series. I never read the Eternal Warrior, but all these tied together. They all have a crossover in one somewhere in the pages. So I was all excited to read some of this. The next one, I'll talk a little bit more because I'm kind of telling you what my next pick is. The Dreadstar at number 3. Again, coming off of the Epic Illustrated story. Number 4 was New Mutants, and if you got a good one of that baby's selling upwards of $300 because it's their first appearance.
Really?
Oh yeah, because they
Holy
made like
crap.
4 different appearances, and anytime you got that first appearance, it was the first appearance of Sunspot, Mirage. It was Daniel Moonstar. The origin of the mutants, Xavier was thought the X-Men were dead, and so he put people together. Sunspot, pretty much almost everybody. Number 6, of course, was number 5 was the God's Love Man Kills, which is fabulous no matter what printing you get. Now it starts getting into some other stuff. Star Slammers, which was Walt Simonson's property. Again, a lot of fun. Number 7, again, they kind of went back and forth between creator properties, and then here's Don McGregor, P.K. Russell did Killraven for number 7. Again, Marvel, so it doesn't count. One I never understood why they did it. Super Boxers. Apparently
Because Ron Wilson pitched the idea.
Yeah, and apparently John Byrne wrote it.
Yeah.
And then Futurians was Dave Cockrum. A couple printings on that one. Heartburst, Rick Vike. Void Indigo. Cory, tell the boys about Steve Gerber's Void Indigo.
Void Indigo was a failed Hawkman pitch that he brought over to Marvel and retooled to be in the Epic line. And last they did a graphic novel and 2 issues, and it was canceled because they could not ship it into Canada due to excessive violence. There was also a retailer who is still in retail, by the way, in Texas, named Buddy Sanders, Lone Star Comics, who went on a crusade about how, the sex and violence, and it was too much, and he hated it, and he would never order such a book, and if Marvel didn't cancel it, he would, not order any of the Epic stuff. I also remember Buddy Sanders crusading against Miracle Man, saying that if
the childbirth, the infamous childbirth cover.
The childbirth issue, he said, I will never stock Eclipse Comics again, except he backed down pretty fast when all of the shops around him upped their orders on Miracle Man and started sealing away customers.
Yeah, unless it has to do with money. Void Indigo was interesting.
One thing I want to say about Buddy Sanders, though,
yeah,
not only is he still around, mycomicshop.com, he still pisses and moans about violence, nudity, and swearing in comics. And I can't believe anybody pays attention to him. Every time there's a controversy about, like the bat penis controversy, he was quoted in most of the national stories about it. It's like, dude, he's a out of touch guy who never wanted comics to be anything more than kiddie books. He campaigned against Vertigo. He campaigned against Neil Gaiman. Anything that's not, a big burly man beating up some other big burly man, he doesn't like.
Unless he can make money off it.
Well, even then he pisses and moans about it.
Yeah. The weird thing, if you ever do find a copy of Void Indigo, and it should be no more than a quarter, the last page of the issue has whoever the character was supposed to be, and she's fully naked. So just kind of one of those weird things. Issue 12 was Dazzler the movie.
Ugh.
Then you go into Starstruck, which is a property by Elaine Lee and Michael W. Kaluta.
Yep.
Swords of the Swashbuckler. Oh, go ahead.
Based on a stage play that Elaine wrote.
Let's see. Swords of the Swashbuckler by Bill Montlo and Bruce Geis. And let's see. After that, there was Red Banner. Number 16, The Aladdin Effect. Another tie-in, Living Monolith. And then they got John Byrne to do a She-Hulk graphic novel with Peter Scorsese. Am I saying that right? The last two I did not pick up. One was Conan the Barbarian, and then it ended at issue 20 with Greenberg the Vampire, who I'm not sure. It was a J.M. DeMatteis Mark Badger. I don't know if that ties in anything in the Marvel universe.
No, it
or
was
that was their
creator
property.
owned. It was creator
So it was kind of fun to see some of the different properties that they did. It's almost the same thing in the Marvel Super Specials, but after that, I just kind of all I needed to do was just sell off a few of them, and I broke the habit. And DC had their own line going at the same time, and maybe sometime in the future I'll visit some of theirs because theirs started big with Jack Kirby's Hunger Dog.
Actually, that was the fourth.
The fourth? Yeah.
Yep,
see how bad I
first,
remember.
The first
it.
three were video game tie-ins because Warner owned Atari.
Then I probably didn't buy those anyways.
No.
So anyways, that's it for me. What you got up next, Cory?
My next one is a book dear to my heart and also one of the jokes that I dearly love, and that is Man-Thing. Yes, Man-Thing is rooted in the Marvel Universe because he is the guardian of the nexus of all realities, and every once in a while a superhero would go through, but it's not a superhero book, it's a horror book. And it started as basically a very simple horror book as a swamp creature. But as Steve Gerber went on, he started throwing more and more bizarre things into it, more and more stories that really didn't fit anywhere else. One of my favorite stories is called Dog, D-A-W-G, which was scripted by Gerber, but actually written and drawn by Mike Plug, about an old man, his invalid wife, and their hound dog living in the swamp.
You telling me he was a hound dog? Oh, wait a minute! I don't want Elvis Estates to sue us.
They just reprinted the entire series in trade paperbacks, and the omnibus is about to go back into print. This is a fantastic, fantastic book. Steve Gerber learned how to write comics on this because if you read his real early stuff, it's very ham-fisted and very, I don't want to call it juvenile in that it's, made for kids, but it's very clear he's learning how to write. Man-Thing is fighting a construction company owned by F.A. Schist. That's right, fascist. Not exactly subtle. But as it went on, it became more subtle. It became more nuanced. It was Gerber's main idea is Swamp Thing is the catalyst for the story. He's not the cause of the story. He's not the main character. It's people reacting to the Man-Thing, or the Man-Thing coming into a situation and it changes because of him. He could do horror, he could do fantasy, he could do comedy, he could do commentary. Toward the end, he did throw in a bunch of superheroes to try and raise sales, but it didn't help. And it's one of those where even if it's in the Marvel Universe, it's not this issue, the Man-Thing fights the Prowler. No, it was more, okay, we're doing a horror story. Marvel had a lot of these horror stories in the 70s that would have some of the trappings of superheroes, but when you would actually read the stories, they weren't superhero stories. They tricked you into thinking it was one while you're reading a horror story. Joe, what's next?
How many have we done? 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5?
This is I've done 3.
Oh no, this is 4.
Yes.
Because I've already thought I talked about it, but I kind of dropped it. For me, number 4, and again, this is not order of popularity, Dreadstar, which started originally in Epic Comics, the magazine that started in '82 that was kind of heavy metalish. And it had such a weird history after that. I guess the next one was published as the Price trade paperback from Eclipse. Came back to Marvel as a Dreadstar graphic novel. And then from there started in as one of the first books in the Epic comic line. And ran, let's see, I got the listing here somewhere. Or do I? Maybe I don't. Well, it ran quite a few issues. Eventually, when I think it was issue 26, it went to First Comics. When Jim Starlin finished it, Peter David took over and ran it until issue 64. He appeared in first issues Crossroads, which again in the 80s was kind of the big thing to cross over all your companies, and he ended up fighting with or against Nexus because Nexus, of course, hated mass murderers, and Dreadstar, of course, murdered the Milky Way galaxy. He showed up later in Malibu. They did a 6-issue series, and apparently Dreadstar had an appearance in Breed 3, which was published by Image, along with other Starling creations such as Word and Kid Cosmos as part of an Elsewhere alliance. So a couple other ones I got to kind of pick up. Now, I've already talked that all these are available now in omnibus form through ominouspress.com, and you can go and you can buy them. I think they're beautiful formats. The only thing I got to do is maybe get myself the slipcase for all these. And just on the cusp of being published, Dreadstar returns. It's an all-new 100-page graphic novel written and illustrated by Jim Starlin, which is amazing because this is the first story he's done in 3 decades. Jim had something going on with his hands too, didn't he? I don't know if it was an injury or arthritis or whatever, but he did come back to the drawing board for this one. He did a Kickstarter for it, and then if you want to pre-order it, you can go right to ominouspress.com. I've enjoyed the entire run. Very science fiction orientated, a lot of different twists. You can almost see some type, I suppose you could call it superhero-ish in some things, but he wasn't necessarily the hero all the time. I mean, he did, after all, kill the entire Milky Way galaxy.
Thanks.
Yep. The entire series basically is the exploits of Vanth Dreadstar and his crew, chief of which is the mystic, I'm not even going to pronounce it, Syzygy. He's Darklock. He's a he's a mystic. Then there's a cybernetic telepath Willow, cat-like humanoid Odie, freebooter Skeevo, and then after Metamorphosis Odyssey, which is the name of the graphic novel that happened in Epic, he ends up in the Empirical Galaxy, where there's 2 sides fighting, and he decides to take an end of it, and his chief villain ends up becoming Lord High Papal of the Instrumentality. And it was just a fascinating run. Absolutely loved it. I'm looking forward to the graphic novel he's coming out with. And eventually, I have all the Peter David runs in comic. And I think Jim eventually said he would like to make a omnibus of the Peter David run. But he's got his own stuff he wants to get in order. And like I said, a few crossovers to pick up here and there. So if you're looking for a good science fiction-y book, you should be able to find issues all over the place. They're not tremendously expensive, but I just went with the omnibus because, to me, I know about a couple years from now I'm going to reread these and just totally blank on half of it. Because, again, I read these when they came out, and as I reread it, it's like, you remember the high point, like the final fight between the Lord Papal and Dreadstar, but you don't remember all the little stuff going on in between. So a lot of fun. And it's all available as well. You can, if you want. Slave Labor had 4 volumes. If you can find them, they're kind of pricey. Dynamite did the definitive collection, 2 parts. I guess volume 2, they only did 1. Volume 2 never published, and I guess it probably won't because he's done a Kickstarter campaign and he's published his own 3-volume set. So take that, Dynamite. So go get some. What you got next up, Mr. Strode?
The next book I have is one of the most successful horror comics of all time. And at the time it was published, they actually had on the cover the #1 selling horror comic. And that is Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan's Tomb of Dracula. The first issue was by Gary Conway. Archie Goodwin did a few, but eventually you got Marv Wolfman, Gene Colan, and Tom Palmer on the book, and they stayed on it until they ended the book with issue 70. This was a tour de force. Yes, it crossed over with Doctor Strange. Yes, it had the Silver Surfer in it, but it was not a superhero book. It was about the descendants Well, no, Van Helsing was in it, and his granddaughter and other vampire hunters were in it, and this was about Dracula being able to outsmart them at every step. Um, Wolfman swung for the fences. Gene Colan knocked it out of the park, and Tom Palmer and Gene Colan were the art team for horror in the 70s. This stuff is beautiful. It's been reprinted in 4 trade paperbacks, 2 omnibuses. There also was a Dracula magazine in the 70s, a black and white magazine, but it sort of danced around the stories that Wolfman and Colan were telling. There was also a Tomb of Dracula magazine after Tomb of Dracula. The comic was canceled, but Marv Wolfman had already left for DC, so it was not good at all. But issue 5 through 70, that's where the main team worked, are some of the best comics of the 70s. Wolfman, in a lot of ways to me, other than his early run on Teen Titans and Crisis on Infinite Earths, this was Wolfman's best work. The characterization, the humor, the plots, the way he and Colan worked together, just fantastic stuff. He got into deep philosophical and religious themes as well as the series went along, because was Dracula... there was an entire sequence where Dracula renounced Satan, but God wouldn't accept him. So even when the vampire hunters tried to kill him, he couldn't die because there was no place for him to go after he died, which was one of the coolest twists ever. Just a great horror comic. Well worth reading, and it still holds up. Joe, what is your number 1?
Do I have to do a synopsis of Battlestar Galactica from the 80s?
No.
Good, because I figure most of us know about it. And what you probably didn't know, although I bet you the Strode knows, there were 2 versions of Battlestar Galactica adapting the TV pilot. What was the significant difference between them?
One was based on the TV pilot, and one was based on the movie, because they re-edited it and put it out as a movie, so they re-edited the comic as well to fit what the movie was, if I remember correctly.
And do you remember what the big difference was?
No, I do not.
Do you remember the name of the bad guy?
Baltar.
Yep. In the original run, when he gets tossed down in front of the Cylons, they execute him.
That's right.
With humans.
Yes, that's right.
And the Marvel Treasury Edition, which I believe it was Marvel Super Special 8, and it was not only in regular Super Special size, which was magazine size, but there was also a Treasury Edition of it. And then, of course, a book where they reprint 1 through 3. And I don't know which versions are in which. All I know is that the Super Special, I believe, has it where he gets beheaded. And then in the TV show, when they did the movie, there's a scene you see where the Cylon warrior pulls his sword, and then they just reverse it where he puts it back in, because the Imperial 3-headed dude, I should know what this guy's name is, but he decides to keep Baltar around, which for the sake of the series was fine, because I can't remember the name of the actor, but he was just wonderful. I'm talking mostly, though, the 23 issue run of the comic. Again, Marvel had Star Wars. They did Star Trek based on only the movie stuff, and that run was largely forgettable, except for the last issue where they did this timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly thing that was fun. And then, of course, Battlestar Galactica. So they were going all in on the science fiction hot properties. And, of course, only Star Wars is the one that people loved all the way up. How many? That went to what? Issue 108 or something? Yeah. It was amazing run. Battlestar Galactica, well, it only lasted 1 season. Apparently there was a spin-off, which we will not talk about. You thought I barfed hard at death, mate. Boy. Anyway, except that last one where, the return of Starbuck, but again, we're not talking about that. Shut up. I'm so stupid. I should just shut up. So Battlestar Galactica, the series started. They reformatted it to get the fact that Baltar wasn't dead. The issues 3 and 4, I believe. No, I'm sorry. 4 and 5 adapted the second hour-long TV episode, and after that, they went on their own. Roger McKenzie wrote a lot of it. Bill Mantlo wrote some. Art was Pat Broderick, Sal Buscema. Walt Simonson started at issue 11.
And Walt Simonson, he took over that book and made it so much fun.
It was a blast.
And as you read it, you could tell when Greg Larson's people weren't looking at it anymore, because he made the characters more and more interesting visually. To where, who was the larger character?
That was Jolly.
By the end, he was bigger than Volstagg.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at the actor, he was big, but not that big. You just look at issue number 23, and he's towering over. There were some runs that were fun where they ran into a hot redhead. No wonder, Cory, no wonder you and I got things for redheads. Who whisked Starbuck away, and then, of course, later on, a couple issues later, when Starbuck returned, all the women were enthralled at Starbuck lands, and he gets out of his TIE fighter, and then, we're being followed by somebody. And Apollo looks at Starbuck. Forget to kiss someone goodbye. Goes on to the next issue. This was a lot of fun. Cory and I talk off camera about fan fiction, things we would write. If I ever wrote a Battlestar Galactica, I would start with, again, the dreaded 80, because they had an interesting thing in there where the guys would time travel. Well, they time travel back to the original series. And then there's also some other characters that they made specially for the series that just kind of wander off. And of course, this has nothing to do with any real Battlestar Galactica canon. Richard Hatch, the guy who played Apollo, wrote a series of fun books, kind of his version of Battlestar Galactica: The Next Generation, the reboot was fun, but I would have loved to have seen this back when a lot of the actors were still alive. He even did on his own dime something that's on the YouTubes now, where he was trying to convince Universal Studio to do it. But to me, this is just a little piece of Battlestar Galactica. It fits in its own continuity. It could have happened between the second and third episode very easy, with the exception of Jolly ballooning up. Just a fun little book, not tremendously expensive. I was able to pick up a run of the whole thing for about $20. And if you've never read it before, it's a fun run, and like you said, when Walt gets on there and just goes insane with the art, he actually starts writing it with issue 19, although it did end at 23. If you've ever read his run on Thor, you should probably go try to pick these up, because they are a lot of fun. And they just exist as an acronym of the time. Like I said, the Star Trek and the Battlestar Galactica, they didn't do what Star Wars did. You look on the toy line, you had Micronauts, Shogun Warrior. Well, Shogun Warrior kind of ended quick. Micronauts went on for a while. ROM went on way beyond the toy. They had G.I. Joe, which they never tried to cross over. And then Transformers, which they sort of kind of did, maybe not really. We've talked about it before, where like a character it appeared in Secret Wars and referred to what was going on in Transformers, but never, other than meeting Spider-Man, they never really crossed over again. Although they did cross over in G.I. Joe a few times. 7 Shades of Bacon? Oh, well, we'll play that game some other time. Cory, tell the good folks, what's your final pick for the day?
My number one non-superhero book from Marvel is Master of Kung Fu. Master of Kung Fu, the early issues were by Steve Englehart and Jim Starlin. They had the rights to do Fu Manchu stories. And Kung Fu movies were really hot. So they decided to combine the two. And it was Fu Manchu's son rebelling against him. And while they were okay, after the second story, it was pretty much just, here's Fu Manchu's latest bad guy to throw at Shang-Chi. And when Steve Englehart left, it floundered a bit until Doug Mensch took over. And Doug Mensch took the series, and rather than dealing with a lot of the Marvel stuff, it was in the Marvel universe because Shang-Chi had fought Man-Thing. Instead, he started to do spy stories mixed with Eastern philosophy. And then Paul Gulacy came on the book. Paul Gulacy, who would then draw Shang-Chi a lot like Bruce Lee, and he used kind of a photorealistic style that, depending on the inker, would either be phenomenal or he was very dependent on his inkers. And the series took off. It was praised. There wasn't much in the way of reviews back then, but there were fan awards. It would constantly win fan awards for best series. Then, after Gulacy left, it floundered a little bit more until Mike Zeck came on the book. And Mike Zeck's art was fantastic. Then Gene Day started inking Mike Zeck, and it hit up another level. And then when Mike Zeck left, Gene Day penciled and inked the book. And to me, that is the artistic triumph. All the way up to Master of Kung Fu number 115. From issue 17 to 115, it is a phenomenal read. It's out in 4 omnibuses. They're also starting to do epic collections. It had shades of James Bond. It actually tied in with James Bond books. It tied in with Sherlock Holmes. It tied in with the Fu Manchu stuff. It brought Marvel's stuff to a second level where, everybody in the 70s was trying to make comics for adults. This was a comic that fit in with those men's adventure novels that were coming out at the time. But Mensch would throw in bits from philosophy books. He would throw in bits from the Illuminati books. I read the Illuminati books at age 13 because they tied in with Master of Kung Fu. And in the letters page, this is inspired by this. Oh, I have to read that because this story's amazing. 13 is not when you should read the Illuminati books, but
I did read the last page. Holy blankety blank blank, it's alive. And then it goes on to book 3.
Yeah. So Joe and I were doing a kind of DVD commentary on the series, which we need to get back to. And just one of the most well-done series. So beautifully drawn.
It is fun. This is the first time I've read them. I read the final issues when they were, we're canceling Tomb of Dracula, we're canceling this, and Marvel had this idea where they're going to wrap up the characters. Well, obviously they didn't because there's a miniseries coming out, but it was kind of interesting at the time, and they were double size. Ghost Rider, I think, was another one, although that kind of petered out. So I was having a blast reading these, we definitely will get this podcast up and running and finish it because we got other series we want to do the same with.
And there's something else we want to do, Joe.
Oh, we're not going to give honorable mention to Marvel Fun and Games?
I actually bought those as a kid.
I bought them because, again, John Nunziata, the comic guy, he was like, well, the key is if you buy it and don't do it, because everybody's going to buy them and do the puzzles. But to keep it in good shape, that might make it a collector's item.
Do you know why they did those books?
I have no clue.
They had put out a Marvel book of Marvel puzzles and stuff, and it sold really well. So they did another one. And I think they did 3 big books overall. And they had sold so well that they went, well, we need to do this as a monthly. The problem was they did it comic size. So it was never put down with the puzzle books. It was put with the comics and just didn't sell very well. And they were like, but all these crossword puzzle magazines do really well. All these things. But no, you're printing it at comic size, so it can only go in the comic racks. And the people who like puzzles aren't buying it. The people who buy comics look at it and go, there are no comics in here.
Yeah. And we're taught not to write in our comics anyway. So
yeah.
Sacrilege.
No, I was talking about the fact that it's November, and from now until Christmas, we don't have ads. Instead, we highlight charities that we like, and here's the one for this week. During the holiday season, we here at Crazy Comics and Stories and the other podcasts in the Solitaire Rose Radio Network turn our ad space over to charities, and the first charity we're going to be highlighting is the Hero Initiative. It's at heroinitiative.org. It helps comic creators in need. The Hero Initiative creates a financial safety net for comic creators who may need emergency medical aid, financial support for the essentials of life, and an avenue back to paying work. Since its inception, the Hero Initiative has been fortunate enough to benefit creators with more than $1 million worth of much-needed aid, fueled by your contributions. It's a chance for all of us to give back something to people who've given us so much enjoyment. You can donate. You can go to Humble Bundle, and there's usually a bundle there that you can purchase and give part of those proceeds. There's an eBay site where you can purchase art and books that have been donated, and there are other initiatives that you can get out on heroinitiative.org. That's heroinitiative.org, one of the charities we will be highlighting this holiday season. And Joe and I were talking about starting up the one of the side podcasts we do. Here are all the side podcasts that I do. The Solitaire Rose Radio Network is currently on a pause, basically because COVID-19 has made it so that I have to work a lot of extra hours at both jobs. But you can still go and listen to my other podcasts. Now, you're probably listening to Crazy Comics and Stories, which is the main podcast. But on this same feed, KRAYZCOMIX, is Solitaire Rose Radio, the solo radio podcast that I do. I've done interviews, I've done short stories, I've done all sorts of things, and you can get to it right here on this same feed. I also do a podcast called Novelcast, where I take the novels I've written and turn them into free audiobooks. That's over at novels.solitairerose.com. Dangerous Dan Moore and I, and of course Wolfie B. Bad, give you bad advice over at badadvice.solitairerose.com. You send in your questions, and we give you the aforementioned bad advice. And then myself and Adam Vermillion from For the Love of Comics do the Fantastic Forecast at fantasticforecast.solitairerose.com, where we go through the issues of the Fantastic Four, 4 issues at a time, to give the plot and commentary on each issue. That's not all. Yes, I'm crazy. I still, over at pwinsiderelite.com, every week on Wednesday, do a recap of the latest episode of AEW Dynamite. I write up what happened, and then myself and Anthony Pyrus will do an audio. Now, you can only listen to the audio, if you remember, at pwinsiderelite.com, and if you're a wrestling fan, you should be, where we then break down the episode, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, give it a grade, and let you know if you should have watched that episode. Those are the other podcasts here at the Solitaire Rose Radio Network. Thanks. And now we get to Joe's favorite part of the show. No, not where he starts counting down the days till 2020 is over so he can take the calendar outside and set it on fire.
We're not going to do our Gregorian throat music competition?
No, it's Joe, what's going on the eBays?
Well, by the time y'all listen to this here podcast, my vacation will be over. And I did put everything on vacation. I did leave everything available to sell. I did put a bunch of stuff up. Matter of fact, well, I'll talk more about it in the geeking. A lot of good stuff selling, but I also had some interesting things from some of our listeners. Travis over in Wisconsin asked me if I'd be interested in trading a book because he heard on our previous thing I was interested in the pulp graphic novel by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips because I didn't read it. And he said, how about if we trade this for something? And I was like, I'm game for that. And he picked out one of the Jack Kirby reprints that I had up. And I was like, cool, that works for me. So, yeah, again, if it was something different, but if you're a listener to the show and you want to do some trading, I'm always up for that. Another guy contacted me and His name's Bob Gray. He had a column in the Comic Retailer magazine, as well as a number of other magazines, where he did the obviously talking about things a comic retailer care about. And he got a hold of me and said, "Hey, you got a bunch of comic retailers where I did the ad, and would you be willing to give me a deal?" And I did. I gave him an offer he couldn't refuse and shipped him a bunch. So hopefully, he also did some stuff in Diamond Dialogue, but I didn't have the issues that he did in. So that was kind of unique. And Bob, I don't know if you ever listen to this here podcast. This will probably be the first one up by the time you get the box I sent you. And usually when I send a box, I include Cory's seen it. I include a flyer just talking about the podcast as well as an invoice on the other side. Unless your eBayer says not to, it's always important to do that, because if the box or the label gets compromised, the post office, when they get around to it, will go into the dead letter office, open it up, and if there's an invoice, they'll either send it to whoever it's for, or they'll send it back to you. Or in the case, what happened about a month ago, they'll send me the empty box and say, "Sorry, somebody pilfered your stuff." So I always include an invoice, which is today's eBay tip. See, I always give you kind of neat little tips just to keep you up and running. In the meantime, everything's fresh up. I mentioned earlier, I visited a comic store, picked up a lot of stuff for myself, but well, when I go on my vacation, if I read it and I don't like it, you know where it's going, and you can check it out. Again, if you buy something and you're a listener of this here podcast, let me know. I'll toss in an extra freebie, something cool. I might, or if you see something you want to do some trading, especially if you know it's something I'm gonna want that I mentioned in the preview show. You never know what I'll do, because my ultimate goal is to get rid of it all, which is ironic because when we go geeking next Friday, I'm gonna be buying lots. Meantime, eBay's up 24/7. Krayz. Come get some.
And now we get to my favorite part of the show. No, not where I fill a Faygo Diet Faygo Cola can with bourbon and pretend I'm drinking soda.
Honestly, it's vodka.
Oh, vodka. Do you hate alcohol?
Oh, well, I just gotta sneak it when they think it's water.
No, it's Freaking and Geeking Joe. What are you freaking on?
Oh, just all the COVID news. I don't watch news a lot, mainly because I'm usually at work. I did, I had training. I'll talk about that in a little bit at work the last couple of weeks, training to go to Checkpoint. But I actually came home, and basically the headlines are one of two things. COVID's bad. The election hasn't been finished yet. So, I just kind of watched to see if there's anything interesting, like a massive car crunch where thousands of people died, or maybe there's a cute baby that gurgled up some 7-Up or something. I don't know. We did get one person bow out. Our good friend Lisa decided, because of all the COVID stuff, she's not going to join us on our geeking when we get together, which is, she travels, because she's a big bad mother trucker. Let me tell you, you don't want to mess with her. And she just says, doesn't know if she's been exposed, but she's been around people, and she doesn't want to bring it and give it to us. And while I'm going to miss hanging with her, I can respect that, because I've even talking to Cory, I'm kind of on the cusp. We may get to that, and if I'm feeling bad, I will just say, hey, I'm not doing it. I'd rather not do it and miss it for 1 year than get you, Cory, or Butch sick. I mean, I already had the scare last time. And this time around, I'd mentioned I've been at work. I've been with the same 5 people for 2 weeks. So none of them had any symptoms. None of them caught on. We were all socially distanced. We had to wear masks while in the building. So I'm knocking on wood. Chris and I actually canceled our family Thanksgiving. Our daughter Dana isn't coming. She felt bad, and I said, no, this is a weird time. Don't. She's her and her boyfriend are in their apartment. They go to work. They go home. They don't go out. That's the key. Just keep yourself safe, keep yourself isolated. I feel bad because this is the first Thanksgiving where my dad has stayed home. Again, same reason. And he's in his 80s. My father-in-law's in his 90s. They're both ex-firefighters, so when they get together, it's always fun to listen to them. But just can't do it. I'm not having my brother or sister over. I'm not having my parents, my in-law. My uncle who comes up from Madison, we just told him a couple months ago, it ain't happening. Just stay safe. I may go to White Castle though, because of course I've been threatened. I'd have to stay outside if I did eat them. See the choices I gotta make? It's tough. Cory, you missed it.
Oh, what did I miss now?
You missed Pie Week. On the show I love, the Jason Matheson show, called The Jason Show, they went to a different pie restaurant in the Twin Cities area and talked to them about pie. And I thought, we have done so many comic runs, we need to do a pie run. Fortunately, I know you don't necessarily want to sit and watch the whole hour, but they put up just the segments of that show. You can either go to the YouTube channel under the Jason Show and look for the pie segment, or just go to their Facebook page. And again, that same thing, they will post, this is the pie shop we went to. Oh, Cory, it's glorious. And I will, if you don't, I will go back and I will get all the places we can go. And maybe next time we go geek, we'll make it a point to hit these pie shops. The other thing I'm kind of freaking on is the House of Mouse being some cheap bastards. Disney's attempting to withhold royalty payments from veteran Star Wars author Alan Dean Foster. And there's a hashtag, Disney must pay. What they're claiming, Disney, is that, well, this is our new contract. We don't have to honor old contracts, which is blatantly untrue. When you buy the properties, all the contracts that are part of it, all the liabilities, all the pretty much everything comes with it. That's why just because Disney bought Star Wars, they weren't able to go to TBS and say, hey, we want the first 3 back. They had to wait till the contract run out. That's why when they bought Marvel, they couldn't go to Universal Studios and say, I shut down the Spider-Man and Hulk roller coaster. It's coming to us. Why they think that? Well, I know why they think. They're thinking because it's a small one-person publisher that they get away with it. However, there is a guild that is getting on board, and they're like, they can't let this go because that would create such a precedence. Could you imagine, Cory, years from now, somebody grabs one of your novel podcasts and goes out and makes $1 million book deal and movie on it, and they're saying, well, we didn't have the contract, wasn't with you. We can do what we want with it.
Yeah, I can imagine somebody doing that.
Yeah, but I
can imagine someone taking a comic strip that I wrote and just destroying it and not giving me any copies.
So you're talking anything that Alan Dean Foster is being published right now, Splinter to Mind's Eye, you mentioned earlier, the Aliens, and Alien 3 that Disney's never paid royalties for or issued royalty statements. So I'm a little perturbed. I mean, you see this all the time. Go look at McDonald's versus Sid and Marty Krofft, where, they decide, oh, well, we're not going to do this. Come sue us. And they lost. And this is kind of a real conundrum because if Foster doesn't stick up for himself, these books are in print. Not Marvel, but Disney's earning money on this stuff. And, when one company buys another, you acquire its liabilities as well as its assets. They're certainly reaping the benefits of this. They're just saying, oh, we get it all free. And of course, Disney's like, well, we'll talk with you, but we wanted you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And they're like, no, that's not happening. So he does have the guild behind him. Disney, of course, is doing what the big mouse does, ignoring the agents. So if you're interested, just go look for the article. Hashtag Disney must pay. It's one of those things where the more of us that get behind Alan Dean Foster, the sooner this will happen. Because if they do it to him, they'll certainly do it to your other favorite authors. I'm sorry, I'm just looking. There's the Star Trek Unsettling Stars Alan Dean Foster book that's still here if anybody wants it, by the way. And that one's good because Cory paid for that. So That's pretty much it for me. What you freaking on, Mr. Strode?
I want to point out something else with the Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster. I think we've talked about it a couple of times, but what it was, after when Lucas was working on Star Wars, he actually commissioned Alan Dean Foster to write a sequel that could be shot low budget if Star Wars didn't do well. And Star Wars, of course, did well. So instead, they took that story and Alan D. Foster turned it into the first Star Wars tie-in novel. So it wasn't just he's doing an adaptation. I can almost see them going, no, it's an adaptation, that's work for hire. But this was more, he was commissioned to create this story that might have been for a movie. The other thing about that is it proves that Lucas's whole, I had all 9 movies in my head all along, was bullshit. He was making it up as he went.
But he said that in Dynamite magazine.
He said it in Playboy. He said it all over the place. No, he didn't.
I remember Bloom County, the spoof of that, where Binkley as Luke Skywalker beheaded Lucas. He says, well, Jedi Knights don't wait 9 years for sequels.
Here in Minnesota, we are on a dial it back. It's not a complete lockdown, but they're dialing back to I think it was after the initial 50-some day lockdown, they opened up somewhat. Bars, restaurants, and gyms, movie theaters, gatherings, stuff like that are all closed. To be honest, the only thing about this that affects me is that I don't get to go to the gym. And when I went to the gym, I would go in the evening when there was only 1 or 2 people there anyway. But I order takeout anytime. I think the only times I've gone to a restaurant, Joe, this year is when I'm with you and Butch. But I understand this is going to be a financial hardship for people, and Congress is just, the Senate is sitting on a relief bill. COVID cases are going through the roof. It never went down. It's like, okay, we had the one peak, and then it went down a little bit, and then we got another peak, and then it kind of leveled off, and now it's going up again because everybody's indoors, and everybody's dealing with the recirculated air, and kids are all in school again. And if the kids are in school, they may be asymptomatic, but they're going to bring it home to mom and dad, and mom and dad will give it to their parents and their neighbors and their friends and their coworkers, and on and on and on. I work from home at the group home, at the office job, and the group home, we are very strict. When I switched from one house to the other, I had to wear PPE for 2 weeks. The hell is that?
Sorry, I was just finishing up my vodka.
So I wish the government would do something, but I know they won't do anything until January 21st. They just won't. Nothing's going to get done until then. So we're going to see.
That's a lot of suffering.
That's a lot of suffering. That's a lot of death. Yesterday, 1,800 people died from COVID.
But it's only as deadly as the flu. Bullshit.
And the second thing I'm freaking on is this means none of the clients at the group home will get to see their family over the holidays, and they won't be able to visit their family during the holidays. And while they kind of understand it, they really don't. So, we set up Zoom calls, we do what we can, but they're not going to get to see family. And for many of them, family is the only connection to the outside world they have, because they haven't been able to go to their day programs since March. I always say that working at a group home is like working at a kindergarten, because no matter what goes around, they're all going to get it. And they have compromised immune systems anyway. So just not going to be a happy holiday at the group home. I'm not there over Thanksgiving. Usually I make the Thanksgiving dinner, but this year they have enough people working that I'm not going to be there. So I'm not doing that, and everybody's going to be there. I think they said something about they might get the Thanksgiving and Christmas catered, but I don't know. Comic-wise, DC's new solicitations came out, and I'm not going to do any spoilers, but man, oh man, the trade paperbacks and hardcovers keep shrinking. It's like they don't want my money. And I will say one thing, online, on one, I think it's the old guys who like old comics. Somebody put up the future world, the DC 2-month event. And of course, all the old guys, this sucks, it's terrible, I hate it. And Mark Waid, who hasn't had anything good to say about DC for years, stepped in and was like, yeah, it's terrible that they're trying new ideas or using up inventory so that the people who created it get paid. What a terrible thing. Mark Waid is defending DC.
Wow, what a Superman.
And the people who said he would never work on their books again have all been fired. And
are you saying he edited his comment?
I'm saying that that he may there may be a reason for that.
Oh, Mark, if
Joe,
you want to come on the show and talk to us, we're more than willing to give you an hour or so.
Joe, what are you geeking on?
Let's see. Cory, they're back. Back on Hulu, the Animaniacs are back, and I don't think they've lost a beat. They brought back Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, Pinky and the Brain, and the first episode was just hilarious, self-mocking, a lot of references, a lot of music. I watched the first episode, and then my wife came in the room, watched the second with me, and she was chuckling. And we went back. I watched the first one. I laughed even harder because there were so many things that I missed because it goes so fast. And then she tapped out. I watched the third. So this is a sign that 2020 is slowly getting better. Or so I hope. Reading, I haven't read a lot because I last 2 weeks I've been at work. We were doing training, 8 to 4:30.
Army back when training, sir.
Yeah, TSA training, sir. It was virtual, which was really weird because it was all I could see. They could sort of see us because we had like a group cam showing the room, but we were all behind computers, so all they saw were like bald heads bouncing back and forth. We were with people all around the United States. I felt sorry for the people in Juneau because, let's see, if I was 8 o'clock there, it had to be like 4 o'clock their time, maybe. I mean, and unlike when I was doing 8 to 4:30 last August, when I got banished to our, well, you got a bad hip, so you can't work department. There, I was just sent and they were basically just parking me because they didn't send me, they want to send me home without pay, but they wanted me to come in and sit kind of as a punishment or whatever. That's how I viewed it. But realistically, if they're going to make me get the doctor's note, they got to pay me. And they did. But this was a little different going in because it was more interesting for the most part. You know, when you go working those hours and you're doing something, yeah, I got home, by 5, 6 o'clock and I was tired, but I didn't feel utterly wasted like I did when I was just stuck in an office and told not to do anything. Granted, some of this was big review. I mean, I've been gone from a checkpoint for 5 years. A lot of things have changed, but not all that much. And we get news, they keep changing baggage around. This may be where I'm going to end up for my career in TSA. So if you ever happen to be passing through Terminal 2, Hubert H. Humphrey, and you see me, which will be hard to tell because, we're all wearing masks and face shields, just say hi. I already have one friend who flies Sun Country give me a rather arduous embrace. Hey now. So that's kind of cool. As far as reading, I got a book from a friend of mine. He read it, and I said, I'd like to read it. And he just gave it to me because this is like a library leftover. Revenge of the Nerd by Curtis Armstrong, *, or The Singular Adventures of the Man Who Would Be Booger. One of the books where he just talks about being a working actor, which, again, I find utterly interesting because I'm not going to be an actor. But this kind of shows, we look at him and go, oh, you're acting, you must be rich. No, these guys work for a living. They're not like Tom Cruise or even Tom Hanks. And I'm not dissing them. I'm just saying they are stars. They get told, hey, I'll give you $20 million to show up on this. Curtis Armstrong auditions. Brainlock. Who did Hellboy?
Guillermo del Toro.
But before that, Ron.
I was thinking director. Ron Perlman's the guy who played
Perlman.
Hellboy.
Thank you. Peter David talks about when he was doing auditions for something he was working on, and Ron Perlman showed up. You're thinking, this is Ron Perlman. He goes, yeah, they do auditions as well. Very rarely do you get a deal where like, well, we have you in mind to do it. And then even if they do, like I was reading something on John Candy, he might say no. John Candy originally was thought of for the Rick Moranis role, but he didn't, for whatever reason, want to do it. So I love books like this. Again, my buddy Don, he just gave me this book, and I'm sure when I'm done reading it, I'll offer it to anybody out there. So if you're at all interested, drop me a note through eBay, through Cory, whatever. We'll take care of it. I did do a little shopping. Like I said, I was up north in the store over in Forest Lake, Remix, celebrating their third anniversary. Stopped in, and last week I stopped in and I said, what you got going? He goes, oh, we're pushing comics or records this weekend. So again, if you like vinyls, he's got some. He had one by Charles Manson. I had no fucking clue Charles Manson ever cut a record.
Joe, Charles Manson was in the Beach Boys.
No idea.
That's why I always say Charles Manson was the second worst Beach Boy ever.
Oh,
Mike Love is the first, because Mike Love is.
And believe me, if I had a radio show or if it was legal to just play obscure, strange music on podcasts without, the whole legal entanglement, I would be on it. Anyways, this week he did comics, and he was almost apologetic because apparently a lot of people went up and hit him up. He said, I put out a lot of stuff and it's all gone. I'm like, I don't care. What I'm looking for is one of two things, either things I know I can flip, or more likely what Cory saw when we were down at Nerding Out a couple of weeks ago, things that I've never seen before. And I will read them, and if I like them, I'll keep them. If not, well, like I said before,
they're gone.
Come get some. You're sold. Not really fired. And I did see a death mate, so I'm feeling a little queasy. And as I've talked about, I'm on vacation. Right after we finished our graduation ceremony on Friday, our FSD, Federal Security Director, came and talked to us a little bit, and I took off. Got to enjoy a little bit of the sunshine. It's kind of 30-ish, 40-ish, but nice and sunny. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm on vacation. So I just kind of sat around. I got home, laid down. I wasn't going to watch the news, but then my daughter's cat came and sat on my lap and promptly fell asleep. That was about 5 o'clock. I stayed there till about 9. I had a lot of ambition last night. And then today I helped my folks. I hit the shop. We're doing a quick podcast. And then tomorrow we're heading up north. And I'll talk about that more whenever we do our next podcast. My goal is to hit a couple of the comic stores that are up there. We're going up tomorrow. It's supposed to be light snow with heavy snow in mid-state. Now I'm concerned about this. I don't know the name of the phenomena, but Cory, remember when we went to Rochester and the wind was horrendous?
Yes.
We were going through some type of weather phenomena. And again, go look, it's on the podcast. That had I known was going on, I would have pulled over and waited. I would have pointed the car in the wind direction. We're lucky we didn't get blown off the road, because this is the type of wind storm that they blew the tornado sirens for, and they also sent out alerts. And of course, we didn't know any of that because we were recording a podcast.
And we're not very alert.
No, not really. I mean, had we gone off the road, it would have made an interesting podcast. Not to mention me swearing at people. My concern is if the band of heavy snow moves over, because we're going right up 35E to Duluth, then when we're on the North Shore, they have an interesting phenomenon called lake effect snow.
Yes.
And if we get caught in that, yeah, it'll be ugly. But we got all-wheel drive. We're gonna kind of what tied into what you were talking about, Cory. The restaurants and bars are going to be closed. So we are either bringing or stopping at Target in Duluth and picking up everything we need. Because where we're going, we're going to have we have an outdoor barbecue. They got a fire pit if we feel like cranking it up. We'll have a stove. I can make Pop-Tarts, whatever, you know. So
Ooh,
unlike
Pop
last time,
Tarts.
oh yeah, I was talking with somebody online, and they were talking about, there was a great debate going on. And matter of fact, Cory, you tell me, eat them raw or toast them?
Toast them.
And some people are saying, no, you just open them up, eat them raw. And people are, I mean, you thought the election was dicey. Oh my goodness, you get people on both ends of the spectrum. Me, I'm both. I'm
You know
also
why
not
you
against,
toast them?
but it melts the inner gooiness and gives you the nice crunch around the edge.
And also, the heat takes the sugar in the frosting and the crust and caramelizes it.
Oh,
So that caramelization gives a richer flavor. Sugar's kind of a one-note flavor. It's sweet, but in caramelization you get more complex flavors. That's why I roast my vegetables rather than boil them. When you boil them, you're not changing the flavor, which is why when you boil your asparagus and your broccoli, they taste almost like grass. But when you roast a vegetable, like a potato, Joe, do you know that you've tasted the difference between a baked potato you make in the microwave, which tastes
I
like
don't know.
nothing,
I don't do that. No.
and a baked potato you make in the oven, where the sugars in that get caramelized and the skin gets really crispy?
Mm-hmm.
It's the more of a richer taste profile. And yes, I do talk about Pop-Tarts as if I'm watching Iron Chef. One other thing I want to say about a Pop-Tart, Joe. You want an argument? Pop-Tarts are ravioli.
No, because you can't eat ravioli raw. See, I'm of the point on the Pop
Nope,
Tart.
it's a dough
I am
around the
not
filling.
I am not against ripping open a Pop Tart and eating it right out of the package. But I am also a fan of just sticking it in my armpit for 30 seconds and letting it warm up. It's the old Boy Scout method. So I'm all over the place with Pop Tarts. I mean, to me, it's like Spam. Crack that can open and just eat it. Who needs to fry it? So yeah, I got vacation coming. And Cory, I told you, hang on to your Detective Comics 27. It just hit a record 1.5 million at Heritage Comics auction in Dallas. So,
I
and
sold
it was
it for
only a
$20 last week.
Oh man.
Hey, I was able to use that $20 to buy some Chinese food.
Well, that sounds like geeking. Cory, what are you geeking on?
First thing I am geeking on is, oh my gosh, is there so much wrestling to watch? AEW Dark on YouTube, free by the way, free on the YouTube. They're running about 2 hours an episode every week. Joe, you've got a Roku, right?
Yes,
If
two
you
of them,
put
in fact.
if you put Fight TV on your Roku, you can watch Ring of Honor live. You can watch Ring of Honor for free.
What was that code word?
Fight TV,
Fight,
F-I-T-E.
fight or bite?
Fight, F-I-T-E. Fight TV. And they have Ring of Honor going back quite a long ways. There's also a bunch of other free wrestling shows like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, etc., etc. But Ring of Honor is back. They're doing shows, and I guess they've got a pay-per-view coming up. WWE is doing way too much wrestling. AEW,
Are
Dynamite
they actually
is
doing
on.
wrestling, or are they just doing their pseudo soap opera?
No, there's wrestling.
Oh, okay.
That's the thing. With WWE, it's back to where it was for me about 2005, 2006, where the in-ring, when they're wrestling, oh, that's cool. Everything outside the ring, all the stories are like, oh my God, I hate this so much. And New Japan Pro Wrestling, they've got the Strong Show, which is filmed in their LA dojo. It's an hour-long show every Friday with the wrestlers who are training in the LA dojo and can't go back to Japan because the quarantine. They're also gearing up for Wrestle Kingdom, so they're doing more and more live shows. They do them in empty arenas as well, but it's Ring of Honor. I don't care what the crowd thinks. I just want to watch Ring of Honor. So much wrestling, I barely have time to keep up with everything. Comic-wise, in my box day, Joe, you know how I like Me the Crime comics.
Oh, yeah.
I finally got, and this book has actually been out for almost a year, but we finally got it. It's a Yo book.
Yo.
Johnny Dynamite.
Dynamite!
Explosive Pre-Code Crime Comics, Pete Moressi's Wild Man of Chicago. This was a detective comic that came out in the 50s, was rediscovered by Max Collins and Terry Beatty. So they worked a deal with Pete Moresi to have the character in Ms. Tree. And now there's a book from Yo Books that reprints all of the issues of Johnny Dynamite and has the Ms. Tree tie-in that they did back in, February 1987, where Ms. Tree, Mike Mist, all work with Johnny Dynamite. Love that stuff. Absolutely love that stuff. And I also have been digging through the Marvel Unlimited and found a series that I did not know existed. It was back when Marvel was throwing all sorts of shit at the wall in the 2000s. Carrie Bates and Paul Galassi did a series called True Believers, which was a group of superheroes who investigated scandals in the superhero world and had a tabloid-like website for exposing them. And there's a tie-in to S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time. There's a tie-in to Iron Man being in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time. But I was reading it going, how come I never heard of this? First off, what a cool title, True Believers. But then Paul Galassi doing stuff. And Carrie Bates is mostly a DC writer. His stuff before Crisis I didn't care for. I didn't care for his the Trial of the Flash, which lasted 2 years and most of my life. Didn't care for his Superman stories, thought they were too gimmicky. But I loved his Captain Atom run and felt that Captain Atom was a really fantastic book when he and Pat Broderick were doing it. So one of the things I like about Marvel Unlimited is I'm able to find these series that maybe when they were solicited, you went, who cares? Or there's too much stuff coming out. But now I can dig in and go, oh, this is actually pretty good. Should have bought it 15 years ago. So keeping me up on that. I am looking forward to Thanksgiving because Mystery Science Theater 3000 is having a Turkey Day marathon with new host segments. People voted on the episodes they wanted to see, so they'll be showing 6 episodes that fans have voted on. They've done this the past few years, ever since they've kind of had a Mystery Science Theater 3000 streaming channel. It's on Twitch, it's on Stir, it's on Pluto, it's on your Shout TV. It's available all sorts of places. So you may not be able to go see Grandma and Grandpa, but you can see Crow, Tom Servo, and Gypsy.
Oh.
And that is what I'm geeking on. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about comic books for an hour and a half.
Which is probably an hour and a half more than we expected you to. So thank you.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
Oh, yeah. I feel like dancing. Cory, hit my music.